Welcome to Silent Screams, where we bring you chilling tales that will haunt your nights and make you question reality. Tonight, we unravel 3 terrifying real horror stories of unnerving new house experiences. Sit back, dim the lights, and prepare yourself for an unsettling journey into the unknown. This is not for the faint of heart. The house stood at the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac, its imposing structure casting long shadows under the pale glow of the streetlights. For Clara and her husband Ben, it was supposed to be the perfect home to start their new life. The couple had spent months searching for the ideal place, and when they first saw the Victorian-era house with its wraparound porch and sprawling backyard, they knew they had found it. But as the moving boxes piled up and the excitement settled, the house began to reveal its darker side. Clara's first unsettling experience happened just 2 days after moving in. She stood in the kitchen unpacking a box of dishes, humming softly to herself, when she felt the air change. The room grew colder, not the kind of chill caused by a draft, but something deeper, bone-numbing. She paused, holding a plate in midair, her breath visible in the cold. Then, faintly, she heard it, a whisper. "Leave." Her heart froze. The voice was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She turned around, half expecting Ben to be playing a prank on her, but the kitchen was empty. The silence pressed in, heavy and oppressive. Clara shook her head, convincing herself it was just her imagination. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted. Later that evening, as they settled into bed, Clara mentioned the incident to Ben. He laughed it off, teasing her for watching too many horror movies. But in the dead of night, Clara woke with a start. The room was pitch black, save for the faint glow of the digital clock on the nightstand. She sat up, her eyes scanning the darkness. That's when she saw it, a shadowy figure standing in the corner of their bedroom. The figure was tall and indistinct, its edges blurred as though it were made of smoke. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she tried to nudge Ben awake, but her body was frozen, paralyzed by an overwhelming sense of dread. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, its presence oppressive and suffocating. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The next morning, Clara was hesitant to bring it up again. Ben's skeptical nature made her doubt herself, but the memory of the apparition lingered. She threw herself into unpacking, hoping to distract her racing mind. But as the days passed, the house seemed to come alive with strange occurrences. Objects would disappear and reappear in strange places. Doors slammed shut on their own, and the faint sound of footsteps echoed through the halls when no one else was around. One evening, as Ben worked late, Clara decided to explore the basement. It was the only part of the house they hadn't fully inspected, and a sense of curiosity, or perhaps a desperate need for answers, drove her down the creaky staircase. The air was damp and stale, the light from her flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. The basement was cluttered with old furniture and boxes left by the previous owners, but it was something in the far corner that caught her attention. There, leaning against the wall, was a mirror. Its ornate frame was tarnished with age, and the glass was cracked in several places, distorting the reflection. Clara approached it cautiously, her flashlight trembling in her hand. As she drew closer, she noticed something strange. Her reflection didn't match her movements. While she stood still, the image in the mirror tilted its head slowly to the side, its expression blank and unseeing. Clara stumbled back, a scream caught in her throat. The flashlight slipped from her hands, plunging the room into darkness. Scrambling to retrieve it, she felt something brush against her arm, cold, clammy, and unmistakably real. Her scream echoed through the basement as she bolted up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind her. When Ben came home, he found Clara huddled in the living room, clutching a blanket and staring at the basement door. She tried to explain what had happened, but her words came out in a jumbled mess. Ben, ever the rational one, insisted on checking the basement himself. But when he returned, he found nothing unusual, no mirror, no strange presence. Clara's terror only deepened. As the weeks turned into months, the activity in the house grew more intense. One night, Clara woke to the sound of a baby crying. The sound was faint at first, almost like a distant echo, but it grew louder and more insistent. She followed the sound down the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. It led her to the nursery, a room they had left empty for the time being. Pushing the door open, she was greeted by a sight that made her blood run cold. The crib they had purchased but hadn't yet assembled stood in the center of the room, fully constructed, with a mobile spinning gently above it. But the room was empty. The crying had stopped. Clara turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind her, trapping her in the room. She screamed for Ben, pounding on the door, but it wouldn't budge. And then she felt it, a presence behind her. Turning slowly, she saw the shadowy figure again, standing at the foot of the crib. This time, it was clearer, more defined. Its face was a hollow void, but its presence radiated malice. Clara's screams filled the house as the figure reached out toward her, its hands skeletal and claw-like. When the door finally flew open, Ben found Clara on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. He pulled her into his arms, but her gaze remained fixed on the crib, her lips trembling as she whispered, "It doesn't want us here." From that night on, the house was no longer just a place to live. It became a battleground, a constant struggle between the living and the unseen forces that claimed it as their own. And as the days turned into weeks, Clara and Ben began to realize that leaving might not be as simple as